You're listening to Talk of Champions, an Ole Miss Spirit podcast with Ben Garrett.
It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time!
Welcome into Talk of Champions. I'm Ben Garrett. I cover your Ole Miss Rebels for the Ole Miss Spirit, OleMissSpirit.com, affiliate of On 3. God bless. Come inside these, the RiverLand Roofing Studios. If you want to talk about putting your Ole Miss money where your mouth is, that's RiverLand Roofing. You can go see my friends Billy Landis and Tate Martin over at RiverLand Roofing. You won't find bigger supporters of the Rebels. Seriously, I mean, they're the ones, did RiverLand, that put on the gala for Jackson Dart and Eli Manning back in the spring. It was RiverLand that helped all-time Ole Miss great A.J. Brown launch his foundation in the spring, and I was there for it. I mean, they're doing great stuff, so support them for all your roofing needs. That's RiverlandRoofing.com, RiverLand Roofing. Speaking of A.J. Brown, I cover Ole Miss, like I said. Been doing it for the Ole Miss Spirit, OleMissSpirit.com, and affiliate of On 3 since 2008. That's when I graduated, the year I graduated from Ole Miss. Since this is the first of our reinvented, if you will, Talk of Champions podcast, I'm going to do a giveaway. I couldn't help myself. I wanted to do that. I wanted to incentivize you guys. I'm planning to have at least one giveaway a week, but don't hold me to that because, man, it can be hard to get this stuff. But for this week, for the first show, absolutely. If you aren't a subscriber to the Ole Miss Spirit, OMSpirit.com, and affiliate of On 3, sign up today. And you can sign up for as low as $1. And if you do, you'll enter yourself in to win a signed A.J. Brown picture, courtesy of no one but Ginger Shrek right here, Ben Garrett. Your good old friendly neighborhood Ginger Shrek is here to give you an A.J. Brown signed picture. If you sign up, if you're not a sub to the Ole Miss Spirit, you can do that today, and you'll be entered to win that picture. Just screenshot the sign up. Send it to me on Twitter, on the Ole Miss Spirit message board preferably, but on Twitter, at SpiritBenX, I guess. Instagram, at IamSpiritBen. And to my current loyal subs, Ole Miss Spirit subs, I love y'all. Y'all know that. Don't worry. I've got exclusive stuff for y'all too. This is just the giveaway for this week. Gracie and Riley Garrett got to eat. My sweet babies. There's Riley. There's Riley. She's in 3rd grade now. That was a long time ago. I was graduating day school. They got to eat, and that means Daddy needs some new sign-ups. So they get first crack. They get the signed A.J. Brown picture. But trust me, I have other A.J. Brown signed stuff that I can give away, and maybe that'll be one too. But if you want to enter this one, you got to sign up if you haven't already. Show it to me. Prove it to me that you did, either on the Ole Miss Spirit message board or on social media, at SpiritBen on X, I am SpiritBen on Instagram. But go to my message board and let me know. Let me see it, and I'll pick somebody. And I don't know when I'm going to announce. I think first of next week. We'll see. I want to give this show particularly some room to breathe, so we'll see. Tomorrow, a new Ivy League will pop up on this Talk of Champions network. So that's Jared Ivey, star Ole Miss defensive lineman who hosts that podcast. So we'll see about tomorrow. But for today, you can enter if you just simply sign up. But what is Talk of Champions before we really dive into the topic of the day? First, this was a show hosted by former Ole Miss defensive lineman, my good friend, and myself, Ken Lockett, and myself, sorry. But then it turned into a daily Ole Miss current event show. And finally, a network with the Ivy League and the flagship, where my buddy and coworker at the Ole Miss Spirit, Zach Berry, does a great job of bringing daily Ole Miss content. The Ivy League, again, hosted by Jared Ivey. A new episode. I think the next guest, is Ole Miss linebacker Kari Coleman, and that drops Thursday, August 8th, so be on the lookout for that. My plan for this iteration of Talk of Champions is simple. What this Talk of Champions show with me doing this moving forward will be. I wanted it to be a show or a place where you can get your Ole Miss questions answered. And I know that sounds simple, but it is. I'll have a lot of guests, and I'll talk about non-Ole Miss topics like politics or religion if y'all request that. But unless you don't, I really just want to talk about, ideally exclusively, the Ole Miss topics that are most dominating the headlines or at the forefront of your mind. What's most interesting to you right now, you the Ole Miss fan? What do I mean by that? A good example is that ridiculous Jackson Dart rumor of last week. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the most online of us that are watching do know what I'm speaking of. But Message Board Geniuses compiled a bunch of message board screenshots, mostly from Mississippi State fans, and it set off alarm bells all over social media. I was actually walking my sweet pups, Rosie, when I got a frantic call from Jarrell Poe. Yeah, that Jarrell Poe, the only one, I guess, who would be the other Jarrell Poe. There's no one at all like him. He's unique. He was desperate, man. My guy was desperate. He was sad. He just needed someone, anyone who might know to, and I quote, tell me it's not true. It wasn't true. The rumor was that Jackson Dart had tore his ACL and he was out for the year. Jackson Dart did not tear his ACL. He was at practice. I saw him. He was fine. It was absurd. And I knew that then, but we confirmed it at practice and through sourcing anyway. That's what we do. But Poe's desperate plea, it legitimately stuck with me. I was like, how many Ole Miss fans are out there like Poe right now who are probably asking the same exact question and has no one to text or call to see if it's true or not? Now, that's what we offer every day at the Ole Miss Spirit, OleMissSpirit.com, affiliate of On3, but we got to reach every Ole Miss fan where they are, and that's what this Talk of Champions can be. Straight to the point, what you, the Ole Miss fan, what you're dying to know, what's happening. So maybe Talk of Champions can be that, and I'm hoping to be daily. Don't hold me to that either, but let's just get through episode 1 and see how it goes. And for me today, what's the most pressing Ole Miss storyline or lines is 2025 quarterback Deuce Knight possibly flipping from Notre Dame, not to Ole Miss, but Auburn. Yeah. He's been committed to he's been committed to Notre Dame since September of 2023. Ole Miss has been, I think, the most consistent, regular rival contender trying to pull him from the Irish since then. Now, Alabama's been in there too. Everybody's been in there. He's been offered by everybody. But Ole Miss was once thought to be the only remaining threat to the Irish in his recruitment, especially after Keelan Russell committed to Alabama. He's a consensus 4-star quarterback for 2025. Everybody's offered, like I mentioned, and despite a lot of volatility, in particularly over the spring and summer, it's been Notre Dame, Ole Miss, and Alabama until recently. And still, despite it all, it's not like he's done the decommitment, recommitment thing. He's been committed to Notre Dame. Auburn seemingly came out of nowhere then. And what am I talking about? So, Steve Wilfong is On3's national recruiting expert. And, folks, he owns that prediction recruiting space. He owns it. He owned it when he was at 247. And he certainly does now that he's at On3. Because On3 is the inarguable industry leader in 2024. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a good company man. Look around. And you need to get on board and sign up if you haven't already. And enter to win that A.J. Brown signed picture. But make sure to screenshot that you signed up. You got to prove it to me. But Steve Wilfong reported earlier this week that Deuce Knight was on the verge of, in so many words, on the verge of flipping to Auburn, not flipping to Ole Miss. And it felt like it came out of nowhere to a lot, including me. I'll admit it. It felt that way to me. Even in this age of NIL, when a school can be a complete non-factor on Tuesday, and with the right offer, the leader by Wednesday. Not saying that that's necessarily exactly what happened here. All money is going to be the same. Everybody wants Deuce Knight. And if they want him, they know they got to pay for him. So it's not like Auburn just dropped the bag and Ole Miss couldn't match or Notre Dame couldn't match if he does flip. That's not what I'm speaking of. I'm just saying when you're open to the highest bidder, just like NFL free agency, the market is intentionally volatile. But anyway, I digress. When Steve Wilfong makes a recruiting prediction, man, you can all but take it to the bank. And Deuce Knight is a Mississippi kid. He's the number 3 recruit in the state, certifiable stud. But think of recruiting coverage a lot like political polling coverage. It's a snapshot in time. And not necessarily, actually probably not at all, an accurate reflection of what's going to happen on election day, or in our case here, signing day. It's notable for Ole Miss because Deuce Knight is the only quarterback they're currently recruiting. So snapshot in time, yes. But if this happens, decommits from Notre Dame eventually and then commits to Hugh Freeze in Auburn, that's going to hurt. If you're the Rebels, that's going to hurt. Because Deuce Knight is the only quarterback they're currently recruiting. They think he's that good. They don't want to compromise. They could pivot. They did it last year with Damon Williams, 4-star quarterback, dual threat quarterback that was drawing Kyler Murray comps from Ole Miss scouts. He was a loss, but late in process, all was forgotten when A.J. Maddox flipped from Texas A&M. And now his 4-star in-state defensive tackle of a brother is committed for 2025. Ole Miss has at times been in on Knight, Russell, Kylin Lacey, who's committed to Texas. And maybe Ole Miss circles back to one of those if and when Deuce Knight makes this pretty surprisingly flip to Auburn, if it does happen according to Steve Wilfong, the recruiting guy, Steve Wilfong. It's going to hurt. Or maybe an A.J. Maddox kind of sleeper emerges, possibly in a few months, just like he did the last time. Or maybe Ole Miss prioritizes an experienced transfer instead. And hear me out. I believe Ole Miss has its 2025 starter currently on the roster. I believe it's going to be Walker Howard, and I believe he's going to be really, really good. Actually, I believe he could step in if, God forbid, anything happened to Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart, that's no small thing, because Jackson Dart has the 6th best odds to win the Heisman next year. Now, let's hope Ole Miss doesn't find out what they look like without him, because he's the engine that drives this thing. Darty season in Oxford, Mississippi, as my man J.D. Pickle would say. But Walker Howard, as far as talent and what I've seen at practice in 2 years now in the system with Lane Kiffin, speaking to him or behind the scenes of the camera, behind the camera with him and Jared Ivey for the Ivy League, he's plenty capable. Plenty capable. Huge arm. Cerebral. Leader. Natural leader. His teammates love him. He's one of the most beloved teammates out there, at least from my vantage point, what I've seen. Austin Simmons is plenty capable. He's a former 4-star, and he could have gone anywhere, but he reclassified an unprecedented 2 classes up and came to Ole Miss. He was a 2025 guy. Now, the question for him, of course, is the UCL and his throwing elbow. It's his left arm. He's left-handed. And he hurt it playing baseball. He's a 2-sport star for Ole Miss, and he's a pitcher. He looked normal out there at practice on Tuesday. That's the last time I went, was Tuesday. And he looked normal. He has a zip on his throws. But also, Ole Miss isn't hitting at all as a team. There's not bullets flying, if you will. Who knows what he'll look like when that happens, when he's really got to cut it loose, you know? And he's playing both sports next year again, as he should, because he's a next-level talent at both football and baseball. But he might have a decision to make by this time next year. That's for tomorrow, though, and for Austin Simmons only. For 24-25, he's an Ole Miss star in both football and baseball. But more to the point of today's Talk of Champions. Ole Miss has the talent to, number one, cover the loss of any player, including Dart. As good as he is, one of the best in the country, I think it would be hard as hell. But I think because of the talent behind him, Lane Kiffin being the brilliant offensive mind that he is, they would find a way to win because they have that kind of talent, especially in the supporting cast. Because, too, Ole Miss has already constructed a roster for the future. And I know that sounds crazy considering what they're about to lose after this year. And it's not necessarily everywhere either. I concede that as well. But at quarterback, they're 4 deep. That's almost unheard of at Ole Miss, at least in my experience. Maybe one of you older cats, I'm only 40, maybe one of you older cats can tell me otherwise when Ole Miss was 4 deep at quarterback. Because I remember what it was like in 2012 on the first day of that preseason practice. And Bo Wallace had no choice but to step in and be really, really good. Because it was slim pickings on those same Ole Miss practice fields back then. A.J. Maddox actually would have been every bit the challenger to Bo Wallace as Barry Brunetti or Randall Mackey was. And he is the number 4 and has little or no shot of seeing the field for Ole Miss in 2024. That's the difference. And the offensive line is the same thing. Another good example of it. Ole Miss, remarkably in 2012, had the same starting 5 on the offensive line from preseason practice number 1 all the way to the Final Horn of the Birmingham Bowl. Hugh Freeze, I remember how whenever he would talk about it, on the record, off the record, anybody would ask him, that 2012 team, a lot had to go right for them to have a winning season. It was a disaster after Houston Nutt went 2-10. But one of the things Hugh Freeze and anybody will tell you about that team, the reason why they were able to have a winning record, go to the Birmingham Bowl, that 5 starting offensive line, they didn't have but maybe 6. It had to be those 5 guys. And they started every practice, every game. That was 7-6, and the offensive line I watched on Tuesday for Ole Miss was better, and it was makeshift. It wasn't what's probably going to be, if you made me project right now, the starting offensive line, because of all the holdouts that they currently have, mostly because of injuries. Well, all because of injuries. I don't want anybody to think it's speculation of something else, including Julius Buelo. He's a 6'8" monster of a human, especially of a tackle, and he's transferred in from Washington, which was one of the 4 college football playoff teams from last season. Diego Pounds is a transfer from North Carolina, and he was at left tackle on Tuesday. He is a next-level player. He's not Laramie because no one is Laramie, but his body type looks more like Laramie than anyone else has in an Ole Miss uniform. Caleb Warren, who started at center for Ole Miss the last 3 years, was at left guard because Ole Miss likes Jarquan Scott, a transfer from Southern Miss at center right now, and want to give that a look. Bryson Sanders is a former 4-star who they love and thinks the future at center and is pushing already. Jaden Williams is still here. So is Micah Pettis, Eli Acker, all veterans. Nate Kelpo transferred in from Washington with Buelo. Let's go to other positions. Ole Miss has the highest graded returning running back in the SEC in Ulysses Bentley, and despite losing Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State, who set records here. Trey Harris is the top-rated returning wide receiver against single coverage in the SEC. And he's joined in his position group by the best graded receiver in 2022 in the SEC, 2022 in Juice Wells, a transfer from South Carolina, and Jordan Watkins, who, by the way, was one of 3 700-yard receivers in the country for Ole Miss last season. And Ole Miss was the only team in football to do that. Caden Lee's drawn Elijah Moore comps from the coaches. Aiden Williams is a former 4-star, the number 2 recruit in Mississippi last year, and he wears number 1, which only goes to an Ole Miss wide receiver the coaches believe is going to be a stud. A.J. Brown wore number 1. Laquan Treadwell wore number 1. Jonathan Mingo wore number 1. Ole Miss has options. And that's pretty much everywhere. Now, there are some spots where you can nitpick. But Princely Monmielen and Walter Nolan, they were 2 top 10 transfers. Nolan was the number 2 transfer in the country according to On3. And they left Florida and Texas A&M respectively, and voluntarily in the offseason because they viewed Ole Miss as a better title contender. And so did Chris Paul, the number one linebacker in the portal, coming over from Arkansas, which used to be contemporaries of Ole Miss, but not in 2024-25. Ole Miss used to dream of beating Florida. I mean, I'm looking at the standings over here. Florida was 5-1. Well, Ole Miss was 4-1 after beating Alabama 27-24 in 2003. Still the greatest Ole Miss football game, for my money, in Ole Miss football history. I love that game. Joe Gunn going in for a touchdown. But they came here. They left those places because Ole Miss had a better shot than their now former schools of winning the title next season. Ole Miss, yeah, it'll lose a lot next year, including Dart. But don't sleep on the depth Ole Miss has and the homegrown talent. It's not overwhelming. Heck, it's probably not league average. 18 of their starting 22 are transfers. And Ole Miss is always going to be portal first. But they're not going to compromise as far as what they're looking for in those high school recruiting ranks and extend out monetarily if they don't got to, financially if they don't got to. They'd extend out for Deuce Knight, no questions asked, no matter what happens between now and December. But I'll be surprised if they're willing to do so with anyone else. They certainly didn't with Damon Williams. Because Lane has no problem. Lane Kiffin has no problem cutting bait and moving on. It doesn't matter the caliber of the player. He didn't blink when A.K. Deere, the 5-star in-state 2025 running back, decommitted last month. Well, 2 months ago now. But I still expect Deere, since y'all are looking for things, I still expect A.K. Deere to end up as an Ole Miss Rebel on signing day. We'll see. Don't hold me to it. Well, hold me to it. I don't really care if you do or not. But if he doesn't, it's recruiting. Ole Miss is in a good place as far as quarterback, is what I'm getting at. And if it isn't Deuce Knight, an NFL prospect already and the MVP of Elite 11, the camp for the nation's best of the best quarterbacks, then it's probably going to be a transfer. And a veteran transfer at that, like to Spencer Sanders, who brought the absolute best out of Jackson Dart, who was pissed last offseason. He was the player he felt like Ole Miss tried to replace him with one of Spencer Sanders and or Walker Howard this time last year. And good, bad, and different, it worked. Because now you've got the best Jackson Dart. He's readying Ole Miss for a title chase. He's readying for a Heisman campaign. He's one of the greatest Ole Miss Rebels ever. What a story. What a ride. But he was pushed by a veteran. A guy had real stripes, over 6,000 yards passing, a lot of starts. I could see Ole Miss going a similar way with one of or both of Howard and Simmons. It probably wouldn't have been Knight. They want Knight no matter what, but he's not coming in for 2025. Maybe so. Maybe he's that good. And maybe they're in that kind of a contention place where they're resetting because they're losing so much. Maybe I'm completely off. Or maybe they go get a veteran quarterback to come in here and ignite the best out of one of or both of Walker Howard and Austin Simmons. Because it probably wouldn't have been Deuce Knight, in my opinion, anyway. No matter what Ole Miss sources have been saying, Zach, our recruiting guy, Zach Berry, our recruiting guy at the Ole Miss Spirit, he's been committed for a year to Notre Dame. And yes, he's been saying all the right things. We have a duty with our job at the Ole Miss Spirit, OleMissSpirit.com, an affiliate of On3, to report on those things. But a year. And actions speak louder than words. He's still committed and hasn't flipped to Ole Miss or Auburn or Alabama. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe there's another twist, another turn, and he's a rebel in the end, like I think Deere is going to be. Or maybe Ole Miss gets him out of the portal next offseason. That's the culture. That's the conversation. That's the considerations, most importantly now, for all schools. Forecasting out like that. Auburn offers Deuce Knight a more viable, immediate starting opportunity than Ole Miss. That's objectively true for 2025. That's objectively true. So all things equal, if all things are equal, then you're reverting back to old recruiting things, which includes I want to play. Ole Miss versus that. It's both a blessing and a curse. The best Ole Miss quarterback room in its history. And Deuce Knight looks at it and goes, man, I can walk on at Auburn. Walk on to the first team at Auburn. What it means for today and even 2025 is not much. And that was true even if he'd been an Ole Miss commit. And you were celebrating. This isn't Eli leaving and Ethan Flatt and Michael Spurlock trying to replace him. Though, I would argue that was more David Cutcliffe didn't know what to do with Michael Spurlock, who went on to have a multi-year career in the NFL. Speaking of Eli, my guy on the wall, O. Manning from the Daily Journal, shouts out to Parrish Alford. He is now eligible for the first time for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Patrick Willis was inducted over the weekend. He's one of 3 Rebels in the Hall of Fame. Can you name the others? Oh, I wrote that down here. Can you name the others? Tell me at the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com and affiliate of On 3. Hit me up on Twitter, X. Hit me up on Instagram. I love Ole Miss trivia. I said when we started the Ivy League, I told Garrett I wanted to incorporate Ole Miss trivia. We'll get there eventually probably or something. Maybe we won't. But we haven't done it yet. And what an opportunity then. Because I'm going to tell y'all something. Ole Miss history is lost these days. I'm going to sound like an old man with a baby face. But listen, old Ginger Shrek here. This stuff is lost. I sat down, me and Jared, I'm going to throw him under the bus because he'd say the same thing to me. He'd rip me apart for it too. Like if I did this, if something he cared about. But like we sat down, we're workshopping the Ivy League. And guess, I'm like, we need to get Patrick Willis on here. Who is Patrick Willis, he asked me. He's wearing, is Jared, the script that's on my diploma. That's crazy. So we're going to have a little Ole Miss trivia. Can you name the other 2 Pro Football Hall of Fame Ole Miss Rebels? It's not just Patrick Willis. Who are the other 2? We got to remember these things. Let me know in the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com, and affiliate of On 3. Most of you probably will know that. I know Billy Landis over at RiverLand Roofing would know. He would know. Billy is a hardcore Ole Miss Rebel. I even want to give you, I already gave you one, Patrick Willis, so give me the other 2. If you can't name at least one of them, come on, guys. If we don't remember it, who's going to? Anyway, Ole Miss wants Deuce Knight. Desperately wants Deuce Knight. And Ole Miss is going to pursue Deuce Knight, as it has from now until he signs with someone in December, when he casts his ballot for his school in the fall. It's a snapshot in time. We'll see if it's Auburn, as Steve Wilfong's predicting today. We'll see if it's Ole Miss. We'll see if it's always Notre Dame, as it has been. But for Ole Miss now and even next year, in recruiting writ large in 2024, be where your feet are. Worry about tomorrow. Because today, Ole Miss has, without a doubt, one of the most enviable quarterback situations in all of college football. The entire country. Thanks for tuning in to Talk of Champions, the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com, and affiliate of On 3. Make sure to like and subscribe all of our podcasts, Talk of Champions, the Ivy League, and the Flagship with Zach Berry. Read all about your Ole Miss Rebels all day, every day at the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com, and affiliate of On 3. You can sign up today for just $1 and go get that A.J. Brown signed picture. Until tomorrow, take care.